When I talk to university leaders and they say, oh, why don't you use the SDG, as a framework for what university does? Their immediate thinking is that we are asking them to do something different to what they do. It is not that. It is just a new lens into something that you already probably do to a greater extent that you can even think about.
Hello and welcome to the Pathway to Impact podcast series by UIN. My name is Balzhana Razbaeva, Manager Strategic Initiatives at UIN, and I'm your host for today. In today's episode, we invited Dr. Victoria Galan-Muros, Chief Research and Analysis at UNESCO International Institute for Higher Education, to discuss how academics can align their work with UN Sustainable Development Goals, overcome challenges and leverage the benefits of integrating SDGs into research, education and valorization, ultimately contributing to a positive global impact. We'll hope you'll enjoy the discussion. I'm glad that I'm having such a great guest joining me today for this discussion. We are very excited to discuss this topic because it's an important one, also in the light of the training program that we're running right now at UIN, Impactful Academics, but also more generally in the context of all of the bigger initiatives that we also have at UIN. To start this conversation, Victoria, I was wondering if you could share your own definition or understanding of what impactful research could mean.
For me, and this is a very personal perspective, impactful research is, in very simple terms, the one that makes a difference in the world, and of course, a positive one. I guess this comes a little bit from frustration. I love universities. I fully believe in their potential to change the world. And I felt somehow frustrated traditionally when I saw the most of the groundbreaking, excellent research work that was done at universities was not having a direct impact in the society, or sometimes not even an indirect one. So for me, impactful research, it's almost what it should be. Research should be impactful. It shouldn't be impactful and not impactful research. It should go all together and tapping into the passion of academics, not just for their research, but also to make a difference in the world. It could be a great starting point.
I couldn't agree more. I think academics can create impact in a myriad of different ways, and it would be great to learn today how SDGs can be helpful in that respect. But before we will go into all of that, I was wondering if you could maybe give us a brief introduction into Sustainable Development Goals.
In 1 or 2 minutes, most of you would have heard about SDGs, but Sustainable Development Goals were approved in 2015 after 3 years of discussions and agreement. We have 17 SDGs, we have 169 targets that taps, in very general terms, into people, prosperity, and planet. They're very ambitious goals with a target in 2030, which means that we are halfway. And the progress of most of them has not been as quick as we would have liked. Particularly these last 2 years of pandemic have set us even further back to reaching those goals in a few of them. Very honestly, as today, is likely that we do not achieve many of these sustainable development goals by 2030, but that doesn't mean that we have to stop trying to get as close as possible. And of course, they're not perfect, but I guess as today, they are the greatest commitment that we as humanity have right now. There was 191 signatory countries, and that's a lot of people agreeing on something, which these days is not easy. Just to highlight that the fact that all countries have the same goals indicate that we are all on the same boat. We are in the same planet, one that we should take care of because, as we usually say, there's no planet B. We're all here. We need to take care of our environment, our people, and our future prosperity. And this is just very broad guidelines that will help us to do that. That is in general. If we look at higher education institutions, for me, we definitely won't be able to get SDGs without HEIs. Higher education institutions and research is absolutely critical. These super big, super complex challenges require complex solutions and radical innovations, and it's going to be very likely that those will come from universities or research centers.
That's most certainly a very ambitious goal for the entire planet to reach all those sustainable development goals. I really appreciate your enthusiasm, and I could clearly see that there is also an enthusiasm across higher education institutions all over the globe that are really trying to position themselves as universities that contribute to sustainable development goals. Now, having heard that, I'm wondering, how can academic research specifically be helpful in advancing and addressing sustainable development goals?
Many ways. I guess I'm putting my academic hat on as well and trying to simplify a complex reality just to give a fairly short answer. I guess for an academic, it is about thinking, am I doing research in one of these 17 topics? Am I aligned specifically with one or several of the 169 targets? Some answers will be yes, some answers will be no, directly. If so, how can I do it better? And even if not, how can I consider SDGs in my research, particularly the most transversal ones such as gender, climate action, well-being? Those are SDGs that no matter what your research is focused on, you are always able to bring along and to consider within your research. And I guess SDG 17, it's, for me, if anything, the most important one. It's a slightly different to the other, and it's about creating alliances. It says that in order for us to achieve SDGs, none of us could do it alone. We need alliances. The next question for an academic would be, who can I collaborate with that can help my research to be more impactful? As I mentioned, SDGs are complex, require complex solutions, and these often require interdisciplinary approaches. So you as an academic can start by collaborating with academics in other fields of work. Let's think about climate change and the wide range of disciplines that are required to tackle climate change, from engineers to doctors to biologists, economists, sociologists, psychologists, many more. So tackling, just as an example, climate change will require you as an academic and as a researcher to collaborate with others. So collaborating with others will already make your research probably more relevant for a specific SDG. But also keep in mind who is going to be affected by your research. And this is usually some sort of societal group, maybe smaller, maybe the whole humanity. Go and talk to them. Go and talk to those people that you think then would be more directly affected by your solution or your approach, because those are probably the ones that are more affected by the current problem. Involve them in your research from the beginning, not just at the end to communicate research results. We keep talking a lot about co-design your research. Of course, you're the experts, but we're talking about listening to our societal groups. The third question is, who are those who can action my research or my research results? Is this industry? So maybe you could undertake your research with industry. Maybe you need their expertise, you need their practical knowledge, their data, their equipment, their infrastructure. Research in IT often requires IT companies. Clinical research often requires hospitals. And I guess the last point is, how can I make my research be more relevant for policy? Try to bring them into your research at the earliest stages. Probably my last point, tap into funding for any of these sources, because government usually put money to see societal impact. And these days, some of the most profitable businesses or sector are actually related to the SDGs. So they are interested because it's part of their business model. Is this doing well by doing good?
I heard something very insightful from what you have mentioned just now. The fact that you said that you can also use some of those SDGs and the alliances you have mentioned specifically to do your research that way. That really makes me think that SDGs is not only a goal in itself, something that the research could be focusing on, it's a framework for how it could be operated and executed in a way. We can call it practice what you preach. You are not only researching, but also trying to enact those principles in the work that you do as an academic. Actually, it doesn't matter what you do. You can utilize those principles quite proactively in the work that is happening. Can we maybe take a moment to talk about the challenges? What are the main challenges that could be associated with working with SDGs when it comes to impactful research?
Nothing is straightforward. So there are some barriers that can be overcome. Some of the things that I found, and let me just very quickly go to university leadership. When I talk to university leaders and they say, oh, why don't you use the SDG, as a framework for what university does? Their immediate thinking is that we are asking them to do something different to what they do. It is not that. It is just a new lens into something that you already probably do to a greater extent that you can even think about. So I would say the same to academics. Don't feel that this is overwhelming, because the result of that is that it can be overwhelming if you think that we're asking to do something very different to what you're doing. As we are saying, we're not going to change anyone's research here per se. From your area of expertise, how can you contribute to those? And again, if you think that you need to focus on all of them, no, not really. Exactly, because we need alliances. And it's like, we are the whole world working on this. It's not that you, one academic, need to focus on them all. Try to focus on some of them. Don't think that this is something that we are putting that should feel heavy over your shoulders. And if you think that as a global scale feel overwhelming, then bring it down. What does this specific SDG that I'm interested in, how can I bring it down to my city or to my region? So that could be a way to start, because one of the first barriers is that when you present this could feel like overwhelming, could feel like something too different to what they've been doing. And also I would recommend, as an academic, check looking back in your career, have you already been doing this? Because I'm sure that you've been doing this somehow. It's just that you might not be even conscious that you have. So it's not starting from scratch at all. This takes me to the point of the lack of training of academics about how to do it. Some universities, and we very much appreciate that, and some governments are promoting that research uses the SDGs, but are we taking enough care to help academics about the how can they do it? And I guess just to finish up, although there are many more, it's also difficult, or could say maybe impossible, to fully capture the impact of your research. So you have to rely a lot into, this is what I think is going to make a difference. You'll be able to measure some immediate outputs, some more tangible aspects. But then if we go long-term, more intangible aspects, the impact for different stakeholders, it becomes difficult. So the fact that it's difficult is a challenge associated to this whole approach. But doesn't mean it's not worth it. It just means that it's difficult to measure.
Hopefully, we can find a way on how to make it a little bit easier on academics, especially given all the multiple activities that they already have to do as part of their work. But now that we discuss the challenges a little bit, I wanted to invite you to outline the benefits. Why should academics actually think about SDGs as a framework to position themselves as impactful researchers?
I'd like to start by a benefit that should be, or I'd like that to be, a very personal one. You're doing something good for the planet, for the humanity, for everyone. You're contributed to make the world better. I like to think that's a good feeling for anyone. As a benefit, I'm going to tap into something that even when it's actually research on research, but we are seeing how many more journals are open to research that is related with SDGs. And also, not just they are open to publish, but they are also having many more citations because there are more people doing research on that. So SDGs in themselves, no matter which one is it or from which approach, are becoming something that, let's put it from a very personal perspective, can help you in your academic career. So that means publishing more and publishing with more impact. The benefit is that once you do your research, you actually have many more chances to translate your research to something that can be directly applicable to your community, to your city, to your region, and hopefully to the world. And now more universities are actually including impact, usually under the frame of SDGs, when distributing internal funding. But also, if we go beyond the university, there are more governments, foundations, companies that are putting research budget into this. Definitely a lot more opportunities are becoming available in the last few years, which means that the direct benefits for academics is only going to be more and more obvious.
Now that we have covered research a little bit, maybe we can speak a little bit about how academics can actually create impact beyond just research. So what is happening in the classroom, through innovating the education. So maybe we can also discuss how that part of the academic work can benefit SDGs.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for tapping into that, because obviously researchers are also academics in some way. So that means that they also have a very important task in respect to human capital development. Obviously, creating degrees in university that are directly associated with SDGs can help, but also in the same way, try to bring SDGs into the classroom and into the curriculum, no matter what you're teaching. There are many SDGs, for not saying even all of them, that could be brought into the classrooms. This education for sustainable development is something that UNESCO has been pushing quite a lot. And we consider that a key transversal skill for students and therefore graduates. We see in the labor market that it's not enough anymore just to be an engineer. You have to have sustainable or green skills. And for some academics, it's not straightforward. How can they include the SDGs in their curriculum? There are more and more training. We have some as part of UNESCO that help academics to include the SDGs into their curriculum, because we assume it doesn't have to be straightforward, but can get trained about how to do that.
Now that we also have touched upon the educational bit, I would like to move to the actual value creation that can lead to impact creation. So what is it in there for academics, connecting it back to SDGs? How can they valorize their research and at the same time make sure that they are contributing to society in one or the other way?
That's a whole new area of opportunities. And once you have your research, there's always the possibility to just transfer that knowledge to someone that can put it in the market or in their society, such as a company. But more and more academics are feeling that they actually want to do that themselves. So they are creating their own companies. They are becoming academic entrepreneurs. And more is in topics that goes in this direction. So if you're an academic, try to collaborate with these companies, but maybe you actually want to create a company and take your research directly to a market. We get more and more companies interested in research that is going to help them to be more sustainable. For example, companies, a lot of research that is coming out of universities in order to get them reduce emissions or measure the sustainability of companies. All that research is always very much welcome by companies. And that means that the transfer is easier and the impact is more. So whether this is through entrepreneurship or transferring your research to companies, government, or any other organization, the impact is always going to be more present.
I am wondering, in your practice and the work with the universities and governments, what should university leaders do better to support academics so that they can become more impactful?
Okay, so I guess that it could start by taking the SDGs as a framework for a university. There are more universities that are doing this, no matter if this is about education or this is about research or the actual management of the university. This means, of course, communicating. So first thing, everyone needs to be familiar with the SDGs and also about how to integrate them into their day-to-day. I've talked again about training. Training is essentially on the familiarization. And I guess that university leaders would also have to break a few walls within higher education institutions. And I'm saying this because you want to have an impact. There are more and more universities that are creating, for example, research centers around SDG topics. And these are usually interdisciplinary, whether this is the Center of Climate Change or an Institute for Sustainable Mobility. So these things are happening, but what happened is that you as a leader need to go beyond the traditional discipline silo approach of universities and just build something that brings together researchers from different areas of your university. It requires an extra effort, but it's needed. And also, as a university leader, you should be as flexible as possible in respect to not just what is taught in your university from a content perspective, but also the how. And that also has to do a lot with the walls. Identify other universities who are focused ideally on the same SDGs. Hopefully, you can do also joint research, even, a joint research center. Facilitate work for your individual academics. If you as a university leader have a meeting with the mayor of your city or some company and you create those strategic partnerships, if you create that framework for collaboration, that is facilitating the work for academics to tap into that. At the end of the day, this is about alliances.
I think that's a very clear call for action for university leaders here. And to follow up on that, I was also thinking of all those organizations such as UNESCO. Apart from doing research and advising on those topics, how can academics rely on those organizations if they would like to be supported more?
We are a small but very ambitious institute, and our main stakeholders are governments in all the member states of UNESCO, and we do work with universities as well. We are doing first studies to try to disentangle and clarify what universities could do to contribute, because sometimes it's not that universities do not want to do it, it's that they don't know how to do it. We have built something that we haven't launched just yet, so this is the first time that I guess I'm speaking publicly about this. We have created a self-assessment tool for SDGs that is extremely comprehensive. It includes all the SDGs and it includes teaching, research, engagement, and also management. The idea is that it will be available for free and it could help universities to guide their decision-making, to test the state in which they are. But we don't expect all universities to do everything in all of them, but it can give them some sort of a roadmap. Because we believe, and this is something maybe that I wanted to emphasize, that no matter if you are considered the top university in the world in, I don't know, whatever ranking, or you are a newer university, a smaller one, it doesn't matter. There is always a possibility to contribute to SDGs. There are lots of changes that can be done without necessarily a lot of funding. It's more a matter of changes within the organization and changes in the mindset and some training. We work with universities all over the world, particularly focused in low and middle income countries. We have seen incredible examples that have done in universities that you might never heard of, but are being truly engines of the social and economic development in their regions. And they're doing, I don't want to compare, but maybe even more according to their capacities than other considered more prestigious universities.
That is wonderful to hear that regardless of lack of resources, some of those universities actually progress quite well and maybe are even at the forefront of such developments. I'm wondering whether we could talk about universal sustainable development when not all nations have the support, infrastructure, and capacity to implement these goals. How do we begin to talk about sustainable development when we know that the playing fields are not level throughout the globe?
It is a very good question, and a good answer will take way more time than I have and probably way more knowledge. No question, playing fields are not the same. But I go back to the point when I say problems are there for everyone to a certain extent. So there is no nation, no matter how developed they are, that can say that they are done with some of the SDGs. There's always going to be challenges in all those areas for everyone. And the fact that we are asking for countries, or to bring it down to universities, to cooperate is because they can really learn from each other. And that playing field that is not even today, ideally it become more even. I see how universities, for example, from Peruvian Amazon and universities in the US have been collaborating into something that directly affects the Amazon, but then it obviously have global implications. The US university have a technology, the Peruvian university have the local knowledge of what can work and how it can work. So they are all global problems. And by solving that, not only we are increasing, let's say, the social and the economic development of that region, of that country, but we are all connected for good or bad. So these are global problems that exactly through collaboration, which is SDG 17, and ideally equitable partnerships, we can actually get the playing fields a bit more even than they are these days. That would be a very short answer to a very big question.
Thank you so much. I thought it was a very comprehensive answer. It's indeed a very complex topic to be tackled. Beyond research and teaching about SDGs, do you think there is still a role for universities to play in building and setting clear concept of sustainability? How do you think universities themselves are issuing enough the topic of sustainability in their own operations?
Universities can talk about the SDGs as much as they want, but first and foremost, they should be role model. They should be examples. They should be implementing each one of the SDGs up to a certain extent in their operations, in their management. So universities can be advocates about gender equality in the world and can even have a research center on it. But how is the university taking care of and supporting female that either study there or that work for them? So that could be said and could be applied with any of the other SDGs. Lots of universities doing research about sustainability. How sustainable are our universities as such? Our infrastructure, our campuses, sometimes not much. It's an important part of leadership, which is do what I say and what I do, because I am being a role model for this. So then I can advocate for that for everyone else.
It's great to see that there's so much interest in the topic and there's so much going on in the area. Thank you, Victoria, so much for joining. Really enjoyed the conversation, learned a lot, and I'm sure our participants did as well. Thank you for sharing your time with us.
Thanks very much, Belgian, for the invitation. A pleasure to be with UIN again, a pleasure to see you again, and to be sharing with your participants and broader audience. I guess I can only finalize saying, let's collaborate. Let's really put this SDG 17 in action, and let's do collaborate to make research more impactful. So yeah, count on me.
Thank you for listening to today's discussion. Follow UIN on LinkedIn, and if you are enjoying our podcast, make sure to subscribe, rate and review in your podcast platform of choice to help other people find this content too.